Action!
Action! Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Grudge Report featuring the Expanse. Happy New Year to everyone. I think at this point it's 2021 wherever you are, at least on Earth. So happy New Year and welcome back to the show. I'm Margaret Reeb and I'm joined by Franck Marchis, who is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute and the chief scientific officer at Unistellar. We both love The Expanse, and we're here to talk about Season 5, Episode 4. So if you aren't caught up, turn back now because we are going to spoil everything and talk about a lot of cool science that's in the show. So before we dive into this episode, I'm on an apology campaign. I have two apologies to make. One is to the people of Senegal, because you were totally right, Franck. The asteroid that hits Earth at the end of Episode 3 does not hit South Africa. Like I said, it hits Senegal. So you were correct in that. And I'm sorry for not knowing my African geography. And my second apology is to Kamina Drummer and the Belters, because as Michael S. pointed out in the comments of our last video, I accidentally called her Camilla, which I'm sure would infuriate Kamina Drummer. So I'm very sorry to her as a character. She's also one of my favorites. I won't make that mistake again. And thank you, Michael, for pointing it out. So now that I've dispatched with my apologies, which I'm sure there will be more to come, let's talk about this episode. It was a shocker overall. What were your overall impressions of this episode, Franck?
Yeah, that was definitely a good new episode for the season 5. I mean, we have an asteroid impact, even multiple of them. A lot is happening in the Tico base as well. I mean, a lot is unfolding basically in the story. And for the science, there is some very good scene and very good discussion to have as well. Yeah. Maybe you should talk about the story slightly first.
Yes. Well, one thing that I want to touch on really quickly, we don't get a lot of Mars this episode, but it does begin with a scene between Alex and Bobby on their ship, and they are trailing the Marchis, I believe is what it's called. It's a Martian ship, and they think some shady weapons deals are going down. And they have a really great conversation, not a lot of science there, but they do get a dispatch from the UN about the asteroid impact that happened in Senegal. And one thing that had me thinking is, with so much going on in the different plot lines, it's important what information you know when, and sort of how the developments on these different areas in the solar system are dispatched. I mean, do you think it seems like there's always a delay? Like when we ping Mars from Earth, what is it, like a 10-minute delay or something, and the orbits have to line out? So is it feasible that all this information would be disseminated across the solar system the way that we see it on the show?
Typically the time, if they communicate using wave, basically the speed of light. Let's use the speed of light as a reference, okay? Between Earth, the speed of the light goes from the sun to Earth in 8 minutes, roughly. I think it's that number. So it's a few minutes to reach Mars. So it's the Jupiter and Jupiter is 4 AU, 4 times the distance Moon from Earth, roughly. And Saturn is like 8 or 9 or 10, depending, of course, of the rotation. So that means that in less than 40 minutes, less than 1 hour, I will say, the sphere englobing as well Saturn will know what's going on. So that's give you an idea in 1 hour, which is quite fast.
Yeah. Okay. So things can spread very quickly across
at the speed of light, of course.
Yeah.
Information can be sent by speed of light. That's kind of good.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, it would be terrible not to know about these catastrophic events. Imagine, that would be terrible. So Mars, there isn't much. That's kind of the one thing that I wanted to bring up about Mars. But Earth, which is the center of a lot of the action, let's take a break for a minute for talking about asteroids, and let's talk about Amos, because he's on Earth and he wanted to go visit somebody mysterious person before he goes back into space and leaves Earth forever. And we find out that it is our old friend Clarissa Mao, who is Jules-Pierre Mao, the big bad from earlier in the show's daughter, who was kind of out for vengeance. And she and Amos struck up this sort of camaraderie, tentative friendship, and she has a body modification that makes her really quick and strong. And so she's jailed in a UN penitentiary underground with a bunch of other people with body modifications. And it's something that we've seen throughout the show with ID spoofers or, other types of modifications that people have done to themselves. What did you think about this penitentiary? I certainly want to spend time down there with those folks.
No, I will not. We can talk about, the body modification. I think it's an interesting part of any science fiction book right now, because this is something that is going to happen. And in fact, it's already happening. Simply a pacemaker, for instance, or if people who has some kind of sickness like diabetes, they may have also this kind of insulin pump directly into their body. So we are starting doing body modification to fix some medical issues, but pretty soon, and I will not make a prediction, but I will say that in 5 years, we will start seeing people having body modification to increase something in their body. The way they see, the way they listen, something, it will happen. Because that's an evolution that's going to, of a human being. We want to increase our potential, and that's an easy way to do that. So in this case, the body modification, for most people we see are the strengths, basically. I forgot the name of the guy who is stronger than Amos, which is rare.
Yes.
But that is body modification, apparently. And she has also, Clarissa also have this. Something I really like in the show, they have this short discussion about body modification. Amos asks, so why are they here? And she explains it's because they have those body modification. She, the person in charge of this jail. And she explained that they are considered to be private part in the Constitution, and they cannot be removed by force. So we are in the future, 200 years in the future, and humans have been using body modification, and there is now a legislation to decide whether or not we can force people to remove those. And the conversation is going to happen very soon. In 5 years, 10 years maybe, but there will be some discussion, some legal conversation about those body modification. The impact, who can go to a place with a body modification. For instance, imagine that you are capable of recording with your eyes. We have seen that body modification, right?
In the show.
If you go to a very simple thing, I went to Prague to the embassy, the US embassy, to get an emergency passport, and I arrived at the embassy, and they basically removed every electronics I had, my watch, my phone, everything.
You don't recording anything, do they?
And I stayed for 2 hours waiting in a place without any electronics. And as you can probably know, it was very tough for me. I have one magazine. Because I'm always
connected. Could recite that by the end of those 2 hours.
So imagine now this is happening with someone who has body modification and can basically record what he can hear, what he can see. How this person can come to a place like this. Maybe they will be forbidden. Maybe there will be some area where people with body modification will not be allowed. So this conversation is going to come.
It's very interesting to think about, especially because many of the body modifications we see on the show, they aren't apparent. Clarissa Matt, we had no idea. She just seemed like an average person walking around until she turned her modification on. The other thing that I find interesting, I recently watched a compelling documentary on Netflix about the CRISPR editing gene, this ability that we may have to edit the human gene sequence, which, could potentially make modifications to how we are as human beings possible. But in this show, which is set in the future where maybe the CRISPR gene, we figured it out even more, it's implants mostly. It seems like people are doing things that could potentially be reversed. It's more technology based than it is editing the actual genes. But it's interesting to think about what's in the future.
Yeah, in the show they talk about body modification as well when when they arrive on the planet Ilus, all the belters need to go through this kind of medication to be able to sustain gravity.
That's true.
And I wonder if that was not a CRISPR-like technology in this case, because it was not effective right away. They had to wait, and this is the kind of genetic modification that they will have to use to bring back the strong skeleton that belters don't have because they live in low gravity.
Yes. And that's a really good segue. We'll come back to Earth because a lot happens in the later minutes of this episode. But you bring up a point about gravity.
Before, just as we're talking about CRISPR, I just remind people that we have apparently done already applied CRISPR on human body. It's been done in China. A scientist called He Jiankyu has done this, claimed to have done that to bring resistance against HIV to babies.
Yeah, and it was very controversial, which sort of loops back with what you were saying about legislation. How are we going to legislate and create laws around this type of editing and changing to our beings that we've never been able to do before? It's a very interesting story. Anything else on CRISPR since we've gone down that rabbit hole?
Oh, there is a lot to talk about.
We'll have to start a whole new Grudge report on CRISPR.
CRISPR is a big controversial. It's an amazing technology that came out very recently. The Nobel Prize of this year or last year was given to people who basically designed the CRISPR technology. And it's extremely controversial because we're changing human being. We could change human being. So now the question we have is that are the people born with a CRISPR modification truly human? And there's a lot of philosophical implication in this too. I'm pretty sure everybody has a point of view on that.
Oh, it's a very emotional thing, right? It's people have a very strong emotional reaction to it. So
there is an entire committee of scientists working on this kind of conversation. And one thing they have proposed, which is very controversial as well, is that any genetic modification applied for human being should be linked to a genetic modification that make people sterile. So they cannot transfer the gene into the modified gene. That's extreme.
That is very extreme.
That's extreme. So there is stories like that, like it's unfolding, it's happening, this conversation is happening. People don't realize that, but there is scientists, politicians talking about this right now.
You should watch the documentary on Netflix because it's very good. And they get into that philosophical debate and what the future may hold. But in the world of the Expanse, we've gone through it. People are running amok with all sorts of body modifications, including some of the belters that are dealing with low gravity. So let's talk about Tycho, because man, oh man, some crazy stuff goes down on Tycho. We have a ship, the Zemnia, approaching because they are going to pick up the reporter who they still think is in the container, except there's a mole on Tycho who's let them know that Holden and Fred Johnson are on to their tricks. And so instead of picking up the shipping container, they attack Tycho. And the mole is Sakai, who is the chief engineering officer on Tycho, somebody who has been like a minor character, but we've seen her a lot. I really like her, so this was quite a turn. But she shoots Fred Johnson, not once, I think 2 or 3 times, and he begins bleeding out in this area of the station where they don't have gravity. They're attached to the floor with their grav boots. So it's not a good time for Fred. But I thought this was interesting science where there are a lot of implications of getting injured in 0G.
Yeah. So first of all, we have not seen someone being shot in 0G yet. So probably there is a lot of things happening in the body when he's getting shot in 0G that we did not anticipate. The first reaction that I like is that they decide to bring him to an area where there is gravity. First, how they do gravity on the station like Tycho is probably by using centrifugal forces. So it's basically probably an area where there is a kind of a wheel and the wheel spin, and the spin of the wheel make that people feel a gravity, some kind of gravity on this, living on this wheel. This is possible. This is technology that we can do now. We don't yet do that on the International Space Station, but maybe one day there will be a new station using this kind of technology to demonstrate that it's feasible. The reason we want to do this is because we know that the body is affected by the lack of gravity. And in the show, this is very clearly explained and demonstrated with the existence of the belters.
Right.
But in the case of the Tycho here, the reason they go to a room with gravity is probably because in this area, they may have all the equipment necessary to operate someone, to fix someone. Like all the medical resources are probably in this area. Because operating someone in zero gravity, it's extremely challenging. Anything is challenging at zero gravity, but an operation is probably one of the most challenging things you can do. So that's the reason I think
I don't even know if you should lift it. It seems like it's not a good recipe at all.
Yeah. So he bleeds and he loses his blood very quickly, and I think he reached the zero gravity area, and it's kind of too late. And do you remember the scene when he's in the zero gravity area? You see this blood on himself. When he's bleeding at zero gravity, you don't see the blood is going away. So there is no coagulation, for instance. That's one of the problems too. So that's why it goes to this gravity area.
Right. Yeah. And this has happened in the show in a previous season. I forget the name of the ship, but it was the minister back. I think it was season 3 when we still didn't know what the protomolecule was doing, but it caused a massive deceleration with ships nearby, and that deceleration, hurt a bunch of people, and they were bleeding internally. And they said, well, if you're in 0G, you can't. There's no coagulation of your blood, and so it's just sort of a death sentence. But I do really like the show's treatment of gravity, because in a lot of science fiction shows that involve space travel, there's gravity on the ship and it's just sort of hand waved away and nobody explains how it got to be, but it's a big issue in reality with space travel. Like you said, the International Space Station, there's no artificial gravity. And it has had a lot of negative impacts on astronauts who have spent a lot of time up there.
I admire the decision of the author to start writing a book, because the book first,
right,
dealing with the consequences of not having gravity. I mean, I didn't read much about it, but I think it's because they wanted to be consistent. Since they created an entire human society, the Belters, which had suffered from the lack of gravity, they had to have in the show the lack of gravity everywhere, basically.
Right.
So it's coming back regularly in the show because of that, and I think it's great, because it's when we see all this Star Wars and other science fiction movie, we forget about that and we say, oh, it's great, he's sitting on his spaceship and he's moving around, but no, it's not going to be able to do that for too long. After a while, the person will not be able to land on a planet with gravity. There is no solution.
Right. Yeah, it's a very important story device too, because as I brought up a couple of times, sometimes it's hard for me to understand how humans could fracture this much and hate each other this much. But, they have very different life experiences and very different problems. And this, the environment in which you live and work and, are born and perhaps die has a profound impact on who you are and what you have access to. So it's very, very interesting. A big undertaking. And yes, I'm glad that the author decided to go this route. So Tycho, the other big thing that happens on Tycho when Fred Johnson unfortunately dies, at least it seems that way in the show, there's a construction drone that manages to get into Fred Johnson's quarters and steals the protomolecule, which he has been hiding. That sequence was pretty cool and also terrifying.
The construction drone.
Yeah, I looked it up because you can see on the side, it says Savage Industries, and Savage Industries is an Earth-based company. They're contracted a lot by the UN. Thank you, the Expanse wiki, because I looked all this up, just to be clear. But it's a construction drone, because at first I thought it might have been Martian technology that the Belters stole, but it seems like they managed to get a hold of it some other way.
I thought it was a Martian technology because it was red. I'm very.
Yeah, that's not a bad assumption to make. We are talking about the red planet.
Save me for some comments.
Well,
that's what I would have said.
Marchis had it and they sold it to the Belters. It's up in the air at this point, but we do know that it is smart and pretty hardy because it held up to a lot of gunfire and also blunt force from Holden, and it still managed to get away.
Yeah, so it does not fully respect the law of robotic of Asimov. Do you know about that?
Yes, of course. I had that thought too, because it seems to be acting autonomously in that it's responding to things that are coming up in the situation.
It's not afraid of hurting a human being.
Right.
So I don't know if we have time to Google the law of robotics, but
is that the first law that you aren't like you can't hurt?
I don't remember them.
I don't, but I know that it's definitely one of the laws.
Yeah. So yeah, this robot is not. Is autonomous apparently because it's capable of reacting very quickly. I'm assuming that there is nobody controlling it remotely. It will be very difficult to control a robot in such an environment.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a great scene. When he leaves, we take the protomolecule, which has this foolish color. It's a scene that we will remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like that blue aura that it has because when the robot cuts into the ground and pulls up the top of whatever apparatus is holding it, you see this blue glow that has sort of become synonymous with the protomolecule because you see it in earlier seasons and it's just very ethereal and alien.
Yeah, I put like my color blue sometimes.
Oh yes, is that protomolecule, Franck? Don't tell me, I don't want to know. Okay, so we've talked about Tycho. Let's go back to Luna and Earth because there are more asteroids and we have, I think, 2 more impacts. There's one impact that comes first near Philadelphia, I believe, so in the United States, and that triggers Avasarala, who's on Luna, to call the UN, the head of the UN. I believe her name is Nancy, and she is on UN-1 flying back to the United States, I'm guessing, and some bad stuff happens. Avasarala is able to convince her to rework their defense system and hook up, I think, the watchtower satellites, which can see through tech with the Sentinels. Forgive me if I'm not getting all the names correctly, but essentially they have a way to detect Martian stealth and they are able to repurpose it and use it to look for any more asteroids that could be coming in. But it comes a moment too late because right when that decision goes out, there is another asteroid that impacts in Asia someplace near UN-1, and it seems like most of the officials from the UN who were on the plane, the group of planes, have perished. So what did you think about this sequence? I know you love asteroids, Franck, and you have plenty to say. So what did you think?
So first, I will say that rule number 1 of any government is not to have in the same place executive, military branches, and judicial branches people. I mean, you don't do that. I don't know what was this airplane, where they were going, but you don't fly together, the military force plus the president plus everybody else, basically. Because it seems that there was most of the important people that Avasarala wanted to meet or talk to were in these planes. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, we have an impact somewhere in Asia. You say, I don't remember, in fact, the details because I focused mostly on the impact.
I think it's implied. I don't know if they ever say. So Let us know in the comments if I'm wrong, please.
Yeah, I thought it was in Philadelphia. I thought that was the Philadelphia one because there's so many after a while I confused them. But let's say an airplane fly in our century. Now our time flies at 900 kilometers per hour. That's 560 miles per hour. And the altitude of an airplane is typically 10 kilometers, right? So we remember from the show, the previous one, that apparently they could divert and cover with stealth technology asteroid which was between 10 to 30 meter diameter and made of iron and nickel, right? Mm-hmm. So I use my favorite calculator that I mentioned last week, the Earth Impact FX program from Purdue University. and I play with it. So something interesting is that if the airplane is at high altitude, 10 kilometers, and an asteroid like I described hit Earth, the air blast at 10 kilometers will be only 50 miles per hour. So that means like completely negligible. The airplane may feel it, but that's not a big deal.
Okay.
Like a gusty wind, basically, suddenly. However, if the airplane is at 1 kilometer altitude, so distance from its area of impact, then the air blast speed will be typically 1570 miles per hour. So that's significant, and I think that's what we see. This with such this speed and the strength, the simulation discussed that the cars and trucks will be displaced on Earth, for instance.
Okay.
So that would probably displace as well the airplane. I'm not sure it will displace it the way we see in the show, but there will be having impact. This is interesting. This is interesting because it kind of shows that even a small asteroid impacting Earth has an impact not only on the planet itself, on the people on the surface, but all the environment around. Okay, and that's the reason I thought it was in Philadelphia, because there is like, I don't know how many airports in this area. There is like 3-4 airports in this area at our present time. So you can imagine that in the future there will be even more of them. So
right.
Asia probably is the same. So the airplane was probably in the phase of landing or taking off. It was at low altitude. That's my explanation.
It was impacted. Yeah, there was a very terrifying scene as someone who has recently gotten over a fear of flying. Now I'm going to add asteroid impact to my list of worries when I'm on an airplane.
All right. So just remind you, let me just give you the number again. This kind of impact will happen statistically every 600 years.
Okay. I feel like I could potentially be safe, so thank you.
And the probability of being 1 kilometer away in an airplane from the zone of impact is very, very, very low.
It happened in the show, though, Franck. Anything's possible. It is a little unbelievable to me that something like this would happen, because all the, as you point out, like, it's statistically very slight, though I guess the fact that a terrorist is hurling asteroids at Earth increases the possibility a little bit. But I like that they're showing it's not just the impact, it's the aftermath, it's the chaos that happens, which we'll get into more in next episode. But I like that they're talking a little bit about that. I will say it seems like there's been a bombing on the Martian parliament that we just don't mentioned in passing, we don't get into, but maybe we'll see it at some point in the future. The one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we wrap up this episode of the Grudge Report is one of the final scenes after this second impact on Earth is on Luna, where Avasarala is just completely devastated about what's happened. And she joins some people who are on the Luna base in, it seems like, a bar or someplace where everybody wants to be together. And they see or hear about another asteroid approaching Earth. But luckily, Avasarala's quick thinking and ability to be persistent and get the defenses reworked is successful, because it seems to be like, I don't know, maybe you know more, but the asteroid approaches Earth, something happens, and the asteroid explodes.
Yeah.
And it fragments into a bunch of pieces. So what's going on here?
So they detect the asteroid. It's very close to Earth, probably because the network capable of detecting, the tower capable of detecting the stealth technology is probably very close to Earth as well. So they detect the asteroid on the last minute, before a few seconds or minutes before the impact. Mm-hmm. So they use probably some kind of missiles, nuclear bombs, something like that, to impact, to basically disrupt and destroy the asteroid in fragment. That would be the easiest technology. So why do they do this? Well, it's because when you break an asteroid in fragments, remember we start with a 30-meter diameter asteroid, right. You break it in fragment of 1 meter, for instance. But then what happens is that those fragments, when they reach the atmosphere of our planet, they basically burn into the atmosphere. And I tested again the calculator to make sure that I don't say something that is inaccurate. But the calculator confirmed my statement that fragments of 1 meter diameter will not reach the surface, even if they're made of iron and nickel, and even if the impact angle is 70 degrees. So that's the strategy. And this is a strategy that we have in planetary defense, but it's really the last resort. That's something that we would prefer to do something else, in fact.
Like knocking the asteroid off of its course, or
Yes.
what else could you do?
So basically, the best way to protect a planet against an asteroid impact is to detect early enough that this impact could happen. So map, as I mentioned last week, map all the asteroids surrounding Earth as quickly as possible and as complete as possible. The asteroids which are 30-meter diameter and more, for instance. This is one of the mandates of NASA decided by the Congress. With this, when we have those maps and you have those probability of impact, you basically look at the one which are the most dangerous. We have a classification, a Torino scale, we call that, to classify those asteroids. You can find that online if you Google Torino scale. And you will see we have a list of asteroids. None of them right now will impact Earth, by the way. So nobody's need to panic right now. Nothing like this has been detected so far. But if one of them could impact Earth, what we will probably do is to build those gravity tractors or other type of technology to divert the asteroid. So at the SETI Institute, we had 3 years ago, as part of the NASA FDL program, a group of scientists and computer scientists working together on the program on how we could divert asteroids and what's the best technology to divert asteroids. So gravity tractor is an interesting one. You basically put nearby the asteroid a massive spaceship, for instance, or whatever, rocket, which has its own propulsion system. And the spaceship move away the asteroid simply by gravity, by moving slowly close to the asteroid. And that will divert the asteroid slightly, and it will miss us. So that's one of the technology. But in fact, nuclear blast is the best technology. It's the easiest one to divert an asteroid. You basically blast a nuclear bomb on the surface of the asteroid, and it will knock it out from slightly from its orbit, so it will avoid Earth. Those are technology
that we have to wait until it's close to do that, though, Franck, right? You would have to wait until it's got.
That's one of the problems so far, is that we need to be able to detect that this impact will happen very early, and we need to be able to develop to build those instruments or those spacecraft, and we need to be able to go there. So that means that's why the early you know about those potentially hazardous asteroids, that's the technical name we use, the better for you, for the civilization, because we will then have the time to build this technology and to go over there to knock them off or to divert them from the orbit. Remember, they are very close to us. We are talking about asteroids which are in the inner part of the solar system. So between Earth and Venus and Mars, for instance. So we can wait for them to come close to us.
Yeah. Okay. It's terrifying. It's interesting to me because so many, a lot of Earth-bound issues or threats kind of happen quickly. But then, of course, there are the ones that, the time scale is longer, right? Detecting something that could hurt Earth, figuring out how to stop. It's just interesting to me to think about how humans balance which threats and which they're going to address, because the ones that have long timetables, to me, are the ones that are always put off. I mean, I think climate change is a perfect example of that, where people are still thinking there's time, or it's not impacting me right now. Because right now, if we detected an asteroid that could have an impact on Earth, it's really bad. Could we do anything about it, or would we really have to start building a lot of technology from the ground up?
So I would say it would be better if we detect one of those in next year, because this year in 2021, it's cool. It's the first time I say this year in 2021, so it's great.
No more.
We are going to launch a spacecraft called Dart. It's a NASA mission with ESA contribution, which will basically go to an asteroid called Didymos, impact the moon, and we hope to be able to detect how this impact divert the orbit of the moon, so to see if we have the technology to do that. This is a technology demonstrator, and it's a very important one for the planetary defense program. So next year we will have some numbers. Next year I will be in end of 2021 to 2022, because I think we arrive in 2022. We will have some numbers to tell you whether or not this technology, the impactor, is indeed capable of diverting an asteroid. But of course, think about it, there is a large diversity of asteroids. They change in size, in compositions. So I think it would be great if we start, after we have done this DART, we do multiple DART mission, copy of them, and we launch multiple of them to test the technology on different type of asteroids, varying the size, varying the speed, varying the composition as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm all for planetary defense.
Good.
For sure. You've got a fan in me, whatever that is worth. But there is plenty, I'm sure, of asteroid talk that we will have next time, because whether or not there's any more asteroids coming, I don't know, but there's definitely going to be a lot of fallout on Earth and across the solar system. So any parting thoughts, Franck, before we wrap up this episode of the Grudge Report?
No, I look forward to talk to you about the next one, because I watched it already.
Oh, no spoilers. Okay, we got to wrap it up before Franck lets something slip. But thank you so much for everybody who watched this video. We really enjoy talking about the Expanse and science. And if you enjoy it too, check out any of the links below. You can get more information from the SETI Institute or get notified when we make a new video available. Also, the SETI Institute is a nonprofit research institution. We are tasked with understanding the nature and origins of life in the universe, and we rely on donations from supporters. So if you support the mission or just like the videos, click the link below and toss us whatever you can. We'd really appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Bye.